Hello everyone, wishing you a wonderful day. Today we're exploring a touching story about a couple building their dream home, where a single slip from a ladder reveals that the most dangerous cracks aren't in the walls, but in the secrets they've been hiding from each other. The wind was wrong that morning. It came in sharp, restless gusts, slipping between the wooden beams like a warning no one wanted to hear. Alex was already halfway up the ladder when Tu Na felt it. That sudden tremble. The house they were building stood skeletal against the pale sky. Bare ribs of timber, the scent of fresh-cut wood rising like hope itself. This was their dream. A small wooden home at the edge of town. A place where Henry would grow taller than the doorframes. A place where laughter would echo in hallways that didn't yet exist. But dreams cost money and time. And sometimes skin. Alex climbed higher to fasten the purlin beam. The ladder creaked beneath him. The wood answered with its own low complaint, Keoket, like it wasn't ready to carry the weight of a family's future. "Hold it tight," he called down. Tu Na's hands wrapped around the ladder rails. "I am." Her voice was steady, her knuckles were not. The contractor had quit last week when the funds ran thin. They had decided to finish it themselves. It would save thousands. It would cost something else. The wind struck again, harder. A foot slipped. A sharp intake of breath. And then, ram! The sound of a body hitting packed earth. Tu Na didn't scream at first. She stopped breathing. Alex lay twisted on the ground, dust rising around him like smoke after an explosion. There was blood. Not much, but enough. "An oi," her voice cracked as she ran to him. "An sao kong." Her hands hovered above his arm, trembling too violently to touch him. He winced, pushing himself up slowly. Scrapes along his forearm, a torn knee, dirt clinging to his hair. "I'm fine," he lied automatically. The ladder lay sideways beside him, their dream lying with it. His mother arrived just then, groceries still in hand. One look at the red streak on his arm and her face drained of color. "From now on, you don't do anything alone. Do you hear me?" He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the unfinished roof, and something unspoken hung in the air, because if a small fall could shake them this much, what would happen when something truly broke? The scrape on Alex's arm scabbed over by the next morning. But Tu Na's fear did not. The house stood unfinished, beams exposed like ribs without skin. They worked anyway, because the bank deadline was approaching. 32 days left before the next loan installment. 32 days to make this place livable. The smell of wet cement mixed with sawdust as Alex mixed concrete by hand. Each turn of the shovel sounded like a clock ticking. Tu Na painted primer onto the wooden walls, white, clean, hopeful. She kept glancing at the ladder, leaning against the wall again, silent, like it remembered. Alex noticed. "I won't rush," he said softly. She nodded, but her grip on the paintbrush tightened. At lunch, they shared a single container of rice and fried eggs sitting on overturned buckets. Wind brushed through the open frame. No windows yet, no doors. Just air and promise. "I can pick up extra shifts," Tu Na offered. "You're already exhausted." "So are you." He didn't answer. That night, after Henry slept, she opened her phone and checked the savings account. The numbers looked smaller than she remembered. She closed the app quickly when Alex entered the room. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes." "Too fast." He studied her, but said nothing. The next week, lumber prices rose unexpectedly. Another blow. They stood in the hardware store, calculating in whispers. If they bought cheaper wood, it might warp. If they bought better wood, they wouldn't afford insulation. The impossible trade-off pressed between them. "Maybe we don't finish the second bedroom yet," Alex suggested. "That's Henry's room." "I know." Silence. The fluorescent lights above them buzzed. Tu Na swallowed hard. "Then we cut somewhere else." Where? Her eyes flickered. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the better wood. Because some sacrifices are easier to carry than regret. Later, Alex found her scrubbing dried cement from her hands in the sink. She had been crying, but when she turned, she smiled. "We're close," she said. He nodded, believing her, wanting to. Outside, the ladder stood upright again, steady, waiting. Henry drew the house in crayons at school. A triangle roof, 3 windows, smoke curling from a chimney they hadn't even planned yet. He handed it to Alex proudly. "This is our house, Beau." Alex knelt to his height. "It's perfect." That night, after Henry slept, Tu Na stood alone inside the wooden frame. The moonlight spilled through the unfinished roof, casting silver lines across the floorboards. The ladder cast a long shadow across the wall. She touched her stomach unconsciously, then pulled her hand away. When Alex stepped outside to take a phone call, her own phone buzzed. A message from the hospital, appointment reminder, ultrasound. She closed her eyes. 3 weeks. She hadn't told him, because the house wasn't finished, because the savings weren't enough, because the fall from the ladder had scared her in a way she couldn't explain. He came back inside, smiling faintly. "Good news," he said. "I might be able to take on a weekend roofing job." Her heart clenched. More climbing, more risk, more strain. She forced her voice steady. "That's good." He stepped closer, brushing sawdust from her shoulder. "We're going to make it." She looked at him, at the man bleeding into dirt for a house, for them, and she realized the real crack wasn't in the wood. It was in the silence between them. If he knew she was pregnant again, would he push harder? Would he climb higher? Would he fall farther? The ladder leaned quietly against the wall. Watching, she swallowed her confession, and the weight of it settled in her chest. Because how long can a house stand when its foundation is built on a secret? The truth slipped out by accident. It was raining. Not hard, just enough to make the unfinished roof leak in thin, accusing lines. Tu Na moved too quickly, carrying a stack of boards. She swayed. Alex caught her. "You're pale." "I'm fine." "Stop saying that." His voice was sharper than he intended. She froze. The ladder stood nearby, rain tapping against its metal frame. "Did you go to the hospital?" he asked suddenly. Her silence answered first. His face changed. "When?" 3 weeks ago." "For what?" She closed her eyes. The words trembled out. "We're having another baby." The rain grew louder, or maybe it was his heartbeat. "You were going to tell me when," he demanded. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From climbing higher." He stared at her. "I almost fell once." "And you think I forgot that?" she shot back. "I see it every time you touch that ladder." "So you lie?" "I waited." "You hid it." "I was afraid." "Of me? Of losing you?" Silence slammed between them. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into a metal bucket. Ping, ping, ping. He turned away, running his hands through his hair. "You think I don't know the risks?" he said quietly. "You think I climb because I enjoy it? I think you'd sacrifice yourself before you'd ever sacrifice this house." He looked back at her then, and for the first time his anger cracked into something softer. "You're wrong." "Am I?" He stepped closer. "This house isn't wood and nails." "Then what is it?" "It's you." Her breath hitched. He pointed at the walls. "I don't climb for beams. I climb because you deserve a place where the wind doesn't scare you." "And what if I'd rather rent forever than bury you?" The question lingered, raw. He didn't have an answer ready. Instead, he said the thing he had never admitted. "I made a bad investment last year." She blinked. "What?" "The cafe partnership. It failed. I took a loan. That's why we're rushing." The villain wasn't the wind. It wasn't the ladder. It was his mistake. "I didn't tell you," he continued, voice breaking slightly, Because I thought I could fix it. The rain slowed, but the damage stood between them. You don't get to carry everything alone, she whispered. Neither do you. They stood in the half-built house, soaked and shaking. Two people trying to protect each other by hiding the very things that could save them. And in that moment, neither knew which would collapse first, the roof above them or the fragile trust beneath it. The next days were quieter, not cold, just honest. They spread the bills across the unfinished kitchen floor. Loan statements, medical appointments, material receipts, reality laid bare. Henry played nearby, pushing a toy car along the wooden planks. The sound echoed lightly. Alex sold his motorcycle first. He didn't announce it. Tuna just noticed the empty space in the yard. That was your father's, she said softly. I know. The ladder now stayed horizontal unless she stood beside it. He didn't climb alone anymore. She stopped checking the bank account in secret. They checked it together. One night, sitting beneath the newly installed roof, Tuna placed his hand on her stomach. I'm still scared, she admitted. Me too. But maybe scared together is different. He nodded. The house wasn't perfect. The second bedroom remained unfinished. Insulation would have to wait. They chose safety rails over decorative trim. They chose hospital savings over kitchen tiles. They chose each other over pride. Sometimes happiness isn't adding something new. Sometimes it's letting go. The wind returned one evening, strong, but the beams held. The ladder stood steady, and when Henry ran across the floor shouting, "This is our house," the echo sounded less like uncertainty and more like promise. They moved in before it was complete. Cardboard covered the gaps where drywall should be. The kitchen smelled faintly of raw wood and hope. At night, the wind still slipped through unseen cracks, but it no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like weather. Alex ran his fingers along the healed scrape on his arm, a faint line, proof of gravity, proof of effort. Tuna stood beside him in the dim living room, one hand resting on her growing belly. Henry's crayon drawing hung on the wall, triangle roof, 3 windows, now soon 4. The ladder lay outside, flat against the grass. Resting. They still had debts. The baby would come before the house was fully finished. Unexpected costs would rise again. Life would not soften simply because walls stood upright. But they had learned something deeper than construction. Dreams built alone fracture. Dreams carried together bend. But they do not break as easily. Alex reached for her hand. This time he didn't promise safety. He didn't promise perfection. He simply said, "We'll climb together." And in the quiet of the unfinished home, with wind brushing gently against timber that now felt stronger than before, they chose, again, to build.